Hey guys, this is Chris. Welcome back to Free Range Phoenix, a blog about narcissistic abuse and codependency recovery. So, somebody asked me to do a video on trauma bonding. So, that's what this is going to be. It's the biggest obstacle to healing from your abusive relationships, because it's the thing that keeps you in them. You can't move forward until that relationship is over. So it's going to get quite in depth, and I hope you will bear with me. I've moved back to Chez Chris for this video because I found that in the office I was using, it wasn't very private, and I had a lot of people walking by as if to say, Who's that guy there? What's he talking about abuse? What does he know about abuse in there? That guy. So this is going to be hopefully a little bit more candid and easy flowing. So the cause of the trauma bond is emotional highs and lows, and the release of chemicals, the effect of the release of chemicals that come with those highs and lows. It creates a very powerful reality distortion in the mind of a victim, and causes them to act in ways towards abusers that you wouldn't expect. So the term Stockholm Syndrome comes from a bank robbery in Stockholm in the 1970s, where after it was over, they found that the hostages were on the side of the bank robbers and wouldn't testify against them. They felt connected to them. So Stockholm Syndrome trauma bond is a survival strategy. And if you can imagine, you're in a situation where your happiness, your health, your life, you feel depends on somebody else and how they feel about you and their behavior. So people pleasing is tied into this as a survival strategy. But if somebody has your life in their hands and they treat you badly and they're shouting and you have like a hostage situation, that creates a lot of, there's a chemical response to that. You feel afraid for your life. You feel, you're in a constant state of threat. So then suddenly when that person provides you with food or lets you go to the bathroom after 48 hours, then you have a wave of relief. You feel positive, you're thankful to that, even though they have you in this situation, it's their fault. You feel thankful to them because you feel better about your situation. So already I think you can imagine how this plays out in abusive relationships. So I think when we talk about trauma bond and Stockholm Syndrome, and from now on I'm just going to call it trauma bond, when we think about trauma bond in the narcissistic abuse recovery community, I think there's trauma bond that comes from the highs and lows of those kinds of traumatic situations. But I think there are other things that tie into the bond, which are not usually mentioned as the same part of the same problem, which is keeping you attached to your abuser, making you want to look on their social media, making you want, that's the least of it, but staying in the relationship, wanting to stay in a relationship is bad for you, wanting to stay with someone who hurts you in all different kinds of ways, even when you know rationally that you need to get out of that situation. There's several things that have a very powerful effect on you that keep you there. So if you're in that situation, understand that you are not alone. Lots of us have been there, and it is awareness that will start to get you out of that situation. So the first thing about this bond is, in terms of abusive relationships with narcissists especially, there's the idealization phase in the beginning. Now, in the relationship I had that started this journey for me, the idealization phase, where it was mostly idealization, was relatively short. I started dating this girl, as I said before, it was a long distance relationship. We were in touch several times a day over, WhatsApp calls and Skypes and all the rest of it. And I think that's almost as good in terms of how your brain responds. That's almost the same these days as being face to face. So it allows a connection to be built. If somebody's idealized, if they're saying sweet things to you in a video call, that's going to have an effect on you just the same as if they were in person. So the idealization phase makes you feel bonded very quickly. It's a more powerful emotional response that you have to idealization than if you're just in a healthier, slow-burning type of love relationship. And your view of your abuser when devaluation begins is distorted by the idealization that you remember. In the beginning, when they start behaving badly, you make excuses for them. If they start raging at you, you're going to be like, whoa, she must be having a terrible day, or there must be something else going on. Eventually, when you realize that it's consistent, they're always raging, they're always abusing you verbally, emotionally, psychologically. When you realize this is happening all the time, you're still making excuses because of the bond you have with them. You still are saying, well, they had a crappy childhood, it's not their fault how they behave now because they had a rough childhood. So the idealization phase that's a longer term thing than just up and down, and it keeps you, the memory of that you project forward as a fantasy, thinking it will come back, but it won't, and the abuse always gets worse. And with relapses later, the abuse gets worse. So anyway, idealization is the first thing I think in this bond. Secondly, repetition compulsion. So when you are initially attracted to these people who eventually become your abusers, in a romantic way anyway, often as friends as well, to be honest. Whatever draws you to these people, it's not just that they're charismatic and attractive physically, usually. It's that you detect something in your unconscious, even from the very first time you see them, something about the way they behave, their mannerisms, that might be their confidence, something betrays to you on a subconscious level that they are similar to your parents, people who raised you. It doesn't have to be biological mother and father, but whoever your caregivers were in childhood, something about these people reminds you of them. It's familiar to you. It's similar to what you had in your family. So you're drawn to that. If you had a difficult childhood, if you were abused by your caregivers, they didn't treat you well, they neglected you, that damage of your childhood, those failed relationships are still in your mind, and you will look for people similar to those caregivers to try and replay that relationship with a different ending. For you, there's in the subconscious, there's no time in the unconscious, there's no time in the subconscious. So your hurting inner child is attracted to somebody you recognize as similar to your caregivers, and you want to continue that relationship and have them be loving to you, have a happy ending to something that went wrong in childhood. And that principle keeps you go, even if a relationship fails, it will keep you going back to similar people to try and live out that relationship with a different ending to what you had in childhood. It's a Freudian idea, I believe, repetition compulsion. So you can see how feeling that somebody is a caregiver to you on some level, if you imagine yourself as a child and you see a person as a caregiver, a parent, part of you feels like with your romantic partner, you depend on them in a life or death way. And so imagine the fear at the thought of losing this romantic partner. Because of what you went through in childhood, you feel as though you will die. There's a real primal panic is what you feel, as if you will die from losing this romantic partner who treats you terribly. So that keeps you bonded. So more normally than trauma bonding, these things have a chemical component which makes it hard to let go of the relationships and not keep looking at the social media, not do all the crazy things you do in these situations. You're chemically hijacked. And in the brain, it is the same as being addicted to drugs, because drugs are only chemicals once they get into your body, and your brain is producing the chemicals you're addicted to. For the highs, you have dopamine and oxytocin, the infamous hug hormone. And with the bad stuff, when you're being abused and neglected and you feel fearful, you have things like cortisol, the stress hormone. And in these relationships where you have the ups and downs, the chemical response is stronger to what happens than it would be in a normal relationship where you might just have a random argument, or you might have particularly one particularly nice day. It's because the relief coming out of a bad cycle gives you a massive high, and then when you have the badness sets in again, you feel extra bad. You feel betrayed because you let yourself feel so good. So if you're in this situation, I really, I empathize. I definitely have been there. It's something that you have to do the right things to get out of, and it will go away with time. But, like anything with self-improvement, you're fighting habits and chemicals and things that you've had for a long time. So it's going to take some work. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about the things you can do to start to break the trauma bond and begin to heal, because that's the goal of all of this, is to get past these awful relationships, heal yourself from them, and start having good ones. So thanks for listening. I hope that this has been useful to you. Please leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you in the next video.